Important announcement of the funding of new blood cancer drugs for people with CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. These two new drugs will be life-changing for the life expectancy and the life quality of people with blood cancer. But they also represent a number of important changes in the way that Pharmac is operating. First of all, for a long time we were frequently told there is no more money. These medicines are being funded by making economies, getting better deals and saving elsewhere to fund more medicine for more patients. The second thing is, for a long time, if people were treated in a private clinic like this because they'd taken out insurance or paid themselves, they were ineligible for Pharmac-funded medicines. Now, this new medicine funded by Pharmac will become funded from the 1st of May for any patient who is currently receiving the exact same medicine in a private clinic like this. The third important change is that for a long time the culture of Pharmac was that people who were desperate found their only option was to picket outside Pharmac's doors with the then chief executive in a war of words with the patient advocates through the media. Today, thanks to our consumer reference group, many of the same people are now inside Pharmac collaborating with the people making decisions, still understanding that there are limited funds, but working through to find win-win solutions such as this. That is an absolute step change in the way that Pharmac's culture works, rather than being at loggerheads with the community, working together to solve a problem that we all face. These are the three features that I think are important in terms of Pharmac's wider work. But what today is really about is for patients, including some here today, being able to access something in return for taxes they've paid all their lives, where previously there would have been no funded access, particularly if they'd chosen to be treated in a private clinic such as this. I'm joined here by Todd Stevenson, the Parliamentary Private Secretary for Health, and Todd is really the driving engine of a lot of the government's thinking about this, but also our Minister of Health, Simeon Brown, who I'm sure will have a bit more to add, and we've really, I think, had a great time working together to bring about outcomes like this. So welcome, Simeon.
Well, thank you so much, David, and it's wonderful to be here, and can I just say it's a great day for patients to have another blood cancer treatment funded by Pharmac. I want to acknowledge the work that Pharmac is doing to expand access to medicines. This government has put significant additional resources into Pharmac, $604 million in last year's budget to expand access to cancer medicines. And this is a key part of doing that, not only increasing investment, but as David said, making sure we get bang for our buck with every dollar that we do invest into Pharmac. And so I want to acknowledge the good work that Pharmac is doing, and also working alongside clinicians and patients. And importantly, in the case of this new treatment, this will make a big difference in terms of providing a treatment which is a first-line treatment, which will mean that patients will spend less time in hospital and more time getting that treatment in a way that is better for them and which will make a real difference in their lives. So this is a great day for patients, as I said, and is all part of this government's plan to continue to increase access to cancer medicines, and goes alongside the significant increased investment that we put in last year, in particular around stem cell transplants as well, to expand access to stem cell transplants, which is another key element of what's required tackling blood cancers. So great to be with you and acknowledge everyone, in particular the patients who this today's news is really all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we're all three of us happy to take any questions.
Minister, what can you take us into a bit more detail as to how we got to this point? What were the key kind of, the key points at which that enabled us to get over the line?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's important to recognise, in this instance, it's not because we've put in more taxpayer money. We put in $604 million extra after budget 2024. That has actually been used up, and about 60,000 more people have access to a medication as a result of that. today's announcement, I think, is significant because Pharmac have done it by going back, looking at some of their own old contracts. If something's become generic and is now available more cheaply, they can cut some costs there and get the same result, freeing up cash to fund these new medications for people with blood cancer. So that's the process. Of course, the medication has to have an application from the likes of AbbVie, who are represented here, one of the manufacturers, also J&J. Then it goes through the technical committees at Pharmac. Then Pharmac decide whether or not to put it on the options for investment list. And then, having ranked the options that we have to invest in new medicines, they work down that list based on what will have the biggest impact on patients' lives for the dollars that they have. They've been able to apply extra dollars from savings elsewhere across their portfolio to get further down their list and hence fund this new medication.
The dynamic between the public and the private, the rule around if you're receiving Pharmac money, it has to be through the public system, seems quite archaic. So can you explain why that was, what was the rationale behind that, and why it's taken up until now to change that?
Yeah, look, I believe it is archaic. I was confronted with this by a member of the public who had cancer at a street corner meeting, and I tried to rationalise it. I realised I couldn't argue with him. He said, look, I've paid my taxes. I've also gone and paid for my private insurance, but now, because I've gone and paid to take myself out of the public system and create space for someone else, I'm rewarded by missing out on my medicines. That was completely wrong, and that's why we're saying, look, if a medicine is funded while you have already begun treatment on that particular medicine, then we will start picking up the tab as Pharmac for your care to contribute. And some of the things that happen as a result, I was with an oncologist on Sunday who said to me, look, we have people who have private insurance. They use that up because there's a limited allowance. Then they have to transfer from a private facility like this into a public facility, perhaps even with a different oncologist, and then the financial year begins again, they go back onto their insurance and have private again. I mean, this is just mad. So what we've done is remove the need for switching back and forward if a medicine that was previously unfunded becomes funded during your treatment. There is still a question about if you have a medicine that is funded before you start your treatment, should that be funded in a private setting? We're not doing that right now for the simple reason that it would put pressure on Pharmac's budget and limit the number of medicines that we could fund. However, one of the things that we will be working through as we go through the budget and in future years is to make sure that, look, if you paid your tax, you're entitled to your medicines, and if you've paid extra to have private insurance and actually take pressure off the public system by having them administered in a private clinic such as this, then you shouldn't lose your access to your medicines.
So what did Pharmac have to say for themselves? What was the explanation behind the rule, and did they push back to say that we should remain or keep with the status quo?
Well, of course, this policy was introduced well before my time, and I don't know what the original thinking was.
You must have engaged with them.
But I do know, yes, I did, and what I do know is that if we were to say, look, all the people who are currently paying for their medicines in private settings were to immediately be funded by Pharmac, that would increase funding costs to Pharmac significantly. Now, I think it's the right thing to do, but there's not the money there to make that transition straight away. But we have been able to find the money to do it for people who are moving, who are already on a medication, on a cancer treatment course. In that case, if we start funding the particular medicine they're on, we will also fund it for them to continue in their private setting. Look, I'd like to get back to you on that because I don't want to get the figure wrong, but I understand it is in the tens of millions if I recall properly.
Also on figures, are you able to say how many actual patients will benefit from today's announcement?
Yeah, the estimate, of course, I just want to say that this depends on how many patients there are and whether they're haematologists or oncologists think it's appropriate. But the forecast is that it will be about 80 to 90 patients over a 5-year period.
Thank you. And just in terms of other blood cancer drugs, there are more on the priority list for Pharmac. Can we expect any further announcements?
Yeah, I mean, the one that, I get letters from just about daily, and that reflects how important daratumumab being funded is to so many patients out there, and I can see the clinicians and oncologists and hematologists nodding behind you. That is on the options for investment list. Pharmac have evaluated it, and frankly, it's very expensive is the issue there. But they haven't ruled out funding it in the future. So, if you see someone about this high, Auburn here, Minister of Finance, answers to Nicola, I do have a budget bid in for more Pharmac money.
You have told RNZ that you do want to get a significant budget, but how is that going? Is having good conversations about that?
Yeah, we are. I mean, of course, I shouldn't make light of it. It's a challenge because the government, like most New Zealanders, is constrained in the money that it has. The need is enormous, and somehow we have to reconcile an unstoppable object and an immovable force there.
Are you hoping that it would be new money, or would it be redistributed from health?
Well, of course, it wouldn't be so much redistributed from health. I hope that Pharmac's continued savings program of making sure they're more economical in the stuff they're already buying could free up money for that. I also hope that we'll be able to put new money from the very small budget allowance that the government has into this. But of course, we could also see if there's other things we could cut down on in health to fund more medicines.
What would that be? What would you like to see cut down?
I don't think. I look at the way that Simeon's managing the health budget, and it's pretty hard to see how he could do it better and save money. So I think he would say quite rightly that they are working very hard to be efficient there.
We are working very hard to be efficient, and we're very focused on frontline services in our healthcare system. We've committed to continuing to put more money into healthcare in each and every budget. We've done that. We'll continue to do that. But as the Minister said, look, those are conversations. There's budget conversations to go through.
This is quite significant, though, right? We're quite low comparable to other OECD countries in terms of.
Look, and we've made it, and we've made a significant uplift in terms of I think as the Minister Seymour said, there are 60,000 additional patients receiving treatments based on the investment this government has made into medicines and cancer medicines.
When it comes to bug cancer, though, that's 180 patients, right?
We've also, as I said, last year I announced increased investment around stem cell transplants, which is a critical part of blood cancer treatments as well. We need to lift our performance in that regard.
Can I understand what you're saying about the comparison with other countries. I just put it in really round figures. When Simeon and I and Todd were elected, the government had left us with a set of budget forecasts. This year, had we done nothing, the medicines budget would have been about $1.1 billion a year. We knew that was unsustainable because it was falling off a fiscal cliff where they'd previously spent 1.5 but only put aside 1.1. So immediately we added about 450 odd million a year in budget 2024 in order to fill in that fiscal hole. The next thing we did was that we said, okay, we've got commitments to fund a lot more cancer medicines, so we added a further 150 million a year. So we've gone from about 1.1 billion a year to about 1.7 billion dollars per year. So that's what we've done so far. But you're right to observe that still leaves us behind other countries in terms of our medicines funding.
And also in terms of the access to medicines, but also the types of medicines, right? Because a lot of these are often outdated by the time that we get.
Yeah, so the way to get them faster is to spend more money so that the new things are on your options for investment list. You've got the money to get down the list. So when it comes to that question, I've been looking at, well, how can we make the case? And what I've done with Pharmac is reoriented their whole attitude from we are here to economise on a fixed budget to how can we make the case that there will be savings to the government across the board if we fund more medicines. So the nature of the budget bid we're making this time is to say to the rest of the Cabinet, look, more medicines could save us money elsewhere. And I don't want to sort of give practical examples because I don't want to give away what ones we're doing. But you just imagine for a moment if you look at Trikafta, which we've already done. Previously, people were having lung transplants, which is not only brutal on your body, but possibly the most expensive thing that the healthcare system could do is actually transplant someone a new lung. There's been almost no lung transplants since Trikafta was funded. So we're starting to look at, okay, well, how can funding more medicines actually save money elsewhere? And what this is really part of, where we get to, and Simeon and I have done a lot of work on medical devices. I'm sorry to go on, but I think it's important, is that we have a major challenge going forward, like most Western countries, with healthcare. If we want to keep up with an ageing population and a shrinking workforce comparatively, then the only way forward is technology to raise productivity. So where we want to get Pharmac to is to be the advocate within the healthcare system, saying, look, if you guys invested more in medicine and technology, we could make the limited number of talented clinicians we have more productive and get to more patients faster and solve that problem. Because if we don't start thinking really hard about this now, take it to 2035, 2045, we're screwed. I mean, you can't import nurses from the Philippines forever.
Just one more then on that, because this is something that you feel really strongly about. You've spoken about wanting to sort of change the model, all of that sort of thing. In terms of that comparison to other OECD countries, is that a commitment that you could make, that you'd like to see that lift in your time as Minister?
Well, it has lifted in my time as Minister. I mean, 1.1 billion to 1.7 billion in the first 2 years.
So what would you like to see it at?
Well, I'd like to see it get to a point where people who are looking at Australia or New Zealand don't see a difference. But a couple of points about that.
How long would that take, do you think? When can we get to that point?
It's not going to happen in the next year or the next 2 years or the next 3 years. I mean, there is a substantial gap there. And, of course, we start with a 40% income gap. So you can understand that, frankly, Australia, that's why our government talks about economic growth. It's not just about cigar-smoking capitalists. It's about caring for people who need to have the benefits of modern medicine. And so, that's an important gap to close. But this whole idea of turning Pharmac from an economiser within a fixed budget to an optimiser of the use of resources in medicine, I believe that will start paying off from this budget.
So can I ask about the National Party promise in 2023 to blood cancer patients? You said they wouldn't be forgotten, as well as those under 13 cancer medications. Do you think you've met that election promise now? Well,
we've continued to, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, we've put significant increased investment into Pharmac. The additional $600 million has funded 33 new cancer medicines, including I think 7 of those for patients with blood cancers. And ultimately, as Pharmac becomes more efficient, we're able to deliver even more. We've also invested more around stem cell transplants. So we're continuing to focus on the needs of patients with blood cancer, and today is a great day in terms of delivering more treatments for those patients, which I think is hugely welcomed.
Is today a step towards meeting that promise, or do you think you have delivered what you promised voters?
Oh, look, we are continuing to focus on the needs of blood cancer patients. We know that there is a significant amount of work to be done. We're proud of the work that we have done, and that's why we've put that additional investment into Pharmac. That's why we're putting further investment in around stem cell transplants, because we know that's a critical treatment for many patients with blood cancers. And that's why, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, Pharmac has to continue to find those efficiencies where those drugs become generic, find those savings. That allows us to continue to invest more in the drugs and medicines that New Zealanders desperately need.
The questions about the hurt that the community voiced after that promise was made, that blood cancer patients wouldn't be forgotten, and then that wasn't immediately followed up on. So do you think in the announcements, and probably something that you can respond to as well in terms of what you've heard from the community, do you believe the announcements that you've made to date, including this one, has adequately made up for the hurt that was felt post that?
Look, I mean, I look at the question a little bit differently. The truth is that this work will never be done, because we live in the most exciting time, I believe, in the history of medicine. The combination of CAR-T, genetics, AI means that more medications are making more things possible than we could have ever dreamed. Even a generation ago, cancer was a death sentence for most people. Now, the survival rates are incredible. So this is a very exciting time, but it's also a major challenge for any government in the Western world to make sure that we're buying the right stuff at the right time, putting the right amount of funds, and then integrating that into our wider medical systems, such as funding medicines for people that use private surgeries. So I don't believe this work is ever done. I don't think it's fair to say, well, are we there yet?
No.
The truth is we have to keep relentlessly increasing our budget.
Though, in terms of have you met the promise?
Well, we're continuing to focus on the needs of blood cancer patients, and I think I agree completely with what the Deputy Prime Minister said. There is a continued need to focus on the needs of blood cancer patients. There will be, last week there was a big discussion. I think the Post was running a series of stories around CAR T cell therapies. Well, that is where many of these therapies and treatments are going when it comes to blood cancers. So the reality is we have to continue to ensure that whether it's Health New Zealand, whether it's Pharmac, as we continue to invest more money into our health system, which is our commitment to continue to invest more into our health system each and every budget, that blood cancer patients are not forgotten and that we continue to focus on improving their lives.
Of course, the work is never done. There's always going to be new treatments. I don't think anyone's saying that. But speaking as a government that made a promise, let people down, and do you think that you've responded sufficiently to that today?
Well, we've continued to put focus on the needs of blood cancer patients, and we will continue to put a focus on the needs of blood cancer patients. And I think today is actually a great day because it's a great announcement. It's a first-line treatment, and I think it's really important that we actually focus on what this is actually delivering today, and to celebrate the fact that actually there is 80 to 100 patients who are going to receive a first-line treatment, which is going to make a significant and meaningful difference in their lives.
How many of the 26 treatments that were outlined by the Cancer Control Agency have been funded for blood cancer since that came out? I think it was in 2024.
Well, I think as I said earlier, there's 33 cancer medicines were funded as part of the uplift, 7 of which were blood cancer treatments. Well, there's 4 which I think Pharmac has also funded in additional around through the reprioritisation and savings, but I'm not exactly sure precisely to your question where those sat on that particular list. I'll come back to you on that.
Happy to line those up, and the only other comment I would make is that to say that it is ongoing because there are so many new discoveries. So, you could take a list from 2 or 3 years ago, and you'll find that actually, there's different medicines available.
Now funding then, if there are new medications, new treatments, should you go and have another look at what you should be prioritising?
Well, again, there's 2 ways you can do this, right? So you can either have a look at Australia and say, well, what works for them in their circumstance, or you can say, look, we're going to respect Pharmac's role in choosing what is most effective for New Zealanders today, and that's actually meant that on this day we're announcing medicines that are going to be life-changing for a lot of people.
Great.
Just talking to Shelley before, she said this means you don't have to go to chemotherapy. Is this saving money there? Is this more expensive or cheaper than chemo? Do you know?
One thing I hesitate to get into clinical discussions about medicines simply because I really think it's important we leave that to the people at Pharmac who have the expertise. But all I do know is that we're moving towards a world where chemotherapy, with its brutal impact on the body, is less and less necessary, and people have treatments now that are far softer on the rest of their body. That in itself is an enormous advance in people's welfare. All right, folks. Well, I don't know if there may be people, our hosts, who may have something to say. Other than that, we're very grateful to the media and press gallery for turning out on this. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh.